Hi, I'm Patty and I'm with Harris County Precinct 4 and we're on another Encore excursion today at the San Jacinto Monument. We will be learning a bit about the construction and the founding of the San Jacinto Monument. We will also get a behind-the-scenes look in their archive library.
Hello, I'm Lisa Struthers. We're here in the San Jacinto Monument. I am the library director here at the Albert and Ethel Hirstein Monument, and I've been working here for 22 years. The San Jacinto Monument was built beginning in 1936, was completed in 1939. It was a project that came about through both the Public Works Administration and the Works Project Administration to put people back to work in the Great Depression. 1936 was the Texas Centennial year, and leading up to that year, there was a big push to have a big commemoration here in Harris County, and it was decided that the best place to do it was here at San Jacinto, and the best thing to do was to build a big monument. The funding for the monument was pretty much put together. It was a federal, state, and private combination of money coming together in order to be a Public Works Administration project. There did have to be both federal funds and private funds pulled together to build it. The person who oversaw it was Jesse Jones, the well-known and well-respected Houstonian lumberman and banker, and he was at the time the chairman of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation in Washington, D.C., which was distributing money in different ways to keep the economy going throughout the country. It was pretty much his idea that the monument should look like it does. He thought that having something that looked like the Washington Monument on top of the Lincoln Memorial would be a good thing to do, and he had lots of debates with the architect, Alfred Finn, about what should go on the top, and the final decision was the 9-pointed star that you can see 5 points from in any direction. When construction of the monument began, most of the workers actually had no construction experience. Most of them were people who had been out of work and needed to be put to work. Many of them lived within the LaPorte, Harris County, Deer Park, Houston areas even. You had to live within 20 miles to be eligible to work on a WPA or PWA project. At the time, there were not as many roads here in Harris County. In order to get here, there were ferries. Many of them took only a few cars. It was a big thing in 1933, I believe it was, when a ferry was put in between Goose Creek, which is now Baytown, and this side of the ship channel that could carry more than 20 cars. Before that, it was only 2 or 3 at a time, or you had to drive a long way around. Other workers, there were workers who came from Houston, since many of them did not have the funds to have a car at the time. There were people who were hired to transport workers from downtown out to the monument, which was another way to put more people to work when people didn't have jobs. We're standing here in front of a model of the San Jacinto Monument. This actually belonged to Alfred C. Finn, who was the architect for the monument. He kept it in his office throughout his life until he retired, and it came to us after his death from his wife. You may notice down on the ground we've got 2 different shafts. It shows that there were 2 different versions at the top. Actually, we're missing the star from one, but at the top of this one in the front, you can see part of a soldier. So one of the plans for the top of the monument at one time was to have a soldier. There were actually multiple copies of a model made. 6 of them were sent to Washington, D.C., 1 to Jesse Jones's office, 1 to the White House for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and then others were displayed in other places in the nation's capital and also here in Texas. We're looking here at a plow that was used to break the ground for the San Jacinto Monument in March of 1936. The plow actually was here in Texas in 1836. The ground was broken by both Andrew Jackson Houston, who is Sam Houston's son, and Jesse Jones. When they did it, the bit of the plow broke off, so a little bit of it kind of remained in the doing of it. We're very happy to have it. The single tree up above was also used. It helps to manage the reins when a team of horses or oxen. It was actually oxen that were used in the groundbreaking. One of the provisions of building the building was that most of the materials had to come from Texas. The stone itself is shell limestone, came from near Bastrop. The quarry is still in operation today. You can see many fossils within the shell. The stone in the exterior building is not polished, while the stone in the interior in the lobby is polished stone. The aggregate within the concrete, you can see a block of the concrete here also, came from near Victoria, while the sand used in the concrete came from the San Jacinto River. We're standing here in front of pictures of the frieze that surrounds the San Jacinto Monument. The frieze was designed by sculptor William McVeigh. He was actually attended Rice Institute at the time, before it became a university, and was a well-known sculptor both here in Texas and also up north a bit. Kind of interesting, he was very careful to be historically accurate in the drawings he did for the carving around the monument. If you look at the one at the upper corner there, Stephen F. Austin undertakes Texas colonization. Originally that was planned to be Moses Austin with Stephen Austin, but then they thought about it and thought that historically that would not be correct, that by the time Stephen Austin started colonization, his father had already died, and it was his mother who encouraged him to take on that task, which is why we do have a woman up there in that picture. You can see earlier examples or earlier drawings that have Moses Austin in the case here that includes actual drawing by the sculptor and some of his working drawings showing how things changed as his work progressed. When the San Jacinto Monument was constructed, there was really no plan at the start to put in a museum here. However, in 1936 for the centennial, there was a Museum of Houston and Texas History that was pulled together to celebrate the centennial and installed in the Julia Idison building of the public library. Once that was there, people thought, hey, it's really great to have a history museum here in Houston. And so then plans were put in place to put the museum here. The building was under construction. The San Jacinto Museum of History Association was chartered in the fall of 1938, and then the museum opened on April 21st, 1939. Many of our collections were donated from descendants of early Texas settlers, including many artifacts that had been on exhibit in that 1936 exhibit at the Houston Public Library. The library is open to researchers by appointment. We do it by appointment primarily because we only have one table for people to sit at, and if somebody wants to look at maps, that pretty much takes the whole table. Our library catalog is available online, so you can look to see what we have. The real treasures in our collection are the manuscript collections, and you can see what we have there through the finding aids we host on Texas Archival Resources Online, which is a good source just for doing research any place in Texas, because more than 40 archives throughout the state share information about their manuscript collections online there. We're looking at some books here in our collection. Most of them were owned by either convents or monasteries down in Mexico. They were published, the earliest one we have, I believe, is from the 1550s, going up through about 1800. Books were very rare and expensive at the time. The book I'm having here in my hands was actually branded the same way that you brand cattle, with an ownership stamp and if you run your fingers along it, you can feel where the brand burnt down into the paper. Many of them are wrapped in vellum, which tends to wrinkle over time with changes in humidity, especially since its early history. It was not in climate-controlled storage. Printing in Mexico began about 1546, so they have a long history of printing there. Many of these books are either in Spanish or in Latin. We have books in 10 different languages here in the library. We're looking here at a uniform that just came off of exhibit. It belonged to Henry Rumler, who was in the U.S. Army at the time of the Spanish-American War in 1898. The uniform is made of wool, not what one would really want to wear in the tropics at the time, but that is what uniforms were made of. We've got his uniform coat, a pair of trousers, and a kind of a gaiter or legging. This document is the earliest document in our collection. It is from 1502 and is signed by Isabella, Queen of Spain. She is granting a carpet to a hospital. If you look at the letters carefully, you'll see that they are much shorter and wider than most letters we write today. The handwriting is very different. And it's somewhat difficult to read also because at the time there were standard abbreviations that were used that we no longer really use. So it's not the easiest thing to read, but it is certainly a very interesting document to have in our collection. This book is a day book that belonged to Dr. Nicholas Labadie. He was a doctor here at the Battle of San Jacinto, did provide medical treatment on the battlefield. Before the battle, he lived on Lake Charlotte, which is in Chambers County. He had a store. This book goes through and lists one day's sales in his store, various days. You know, it lists each day on a different page. It's really interesting to see what goods were in Texas in the early 1830s, the early 1830s, and just to see who was here to purchase things. That's good information for genealogists. If you're looking to see if you think your ancestor was here, to find out what they actually purchased and what things cost, and just an interesting item to look at.
Thank you for joining us on another Encore Excursion. We look forward to seeing you soon.